AMC stock gamma squeeze, short squeeze, $1,400? AMC master exit plan, AMC stock short squeeze to 5,000. Someone confirms AMC stock will explode to 100,000.
Okay. All right. So I just got off with that someone, and they said to leave a like on the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. So I'm going to crawl into your headspace really quickly, but I sold my AMC, but I also got back in, and I bought back in, and I sold, and I bought back in, and I sold. It's almost like I'm day trading or something like that. Now, the reason I'm making this is because I've already dunked on the Oxygen boys and how they're basically running on hopium, and now they're on copium. But as much as I'd like to dunk on them, I think AMC should be a bigger focus because I see a bigger problem there. I think the biggest problem we're seeing right now is that there's a lot of over-exaggeration, there's a lot of fanaticism, there's a lot of like surrealistic expectations being put on the stock. Honestly, just go to YouTube and type in AMC stock and then scroll through and look at all these sorts of like weird expectations for the stock and just how everybody's just so fanaticized by it. Like, just take a quick gander through it yourself on your own time as well. But even if we were to go to somewhere else, like say StockTwits, we can see people going like this, like $200 AMC SOS, which is another shit company, which again, you guys should have seen the video for it. I just had to take a quick scroll through it. It's nothing but weird price targets. 70 initial breaking point, new price stability at 100, 120, et cetera, blah, blah, all this sort of thing. I think you get the point. So thanks to YouTube stats, I know that most people only stay around for another minute and a half maybe before they start typing angry comments and run off and stuff like that. I kind of encourage you to stay to the end of the video, maybe pick out some points that you feel are applicable or that you can work with just to get a better like overall point of view, because I think that this whole narrow point of view, that thinking that it can only go up, is only setting you up to fail. And on top of that, in no way am I telling you to buy or sell. You're responsible for your own actions, but I'm also saying on top of that no one ever said you couldn't scale out of this thing. And on top of that as well, no one ever said that you shouldn't exercise some sort of caution going through with this. Yeah, we read all these articles all the time about them saying, hedge funds have lost $6 billion, or, these funds have lost $6 billion and stuff like that. But it's unrealistic to expect that some of these funds only have $6 billion, or, that they might have only like $10 billion or something like that. There's a lot more that goes around and behind the scenes as well. Like, for example, no one ever really talks about backstopping very often, and who knows who can backstop who in this industry. So I know that the question is now thrown at me, and what I think is realistic, and the answer to that is I don't know. There's not really any sort of thing that I can think of that is a realistic expectations for this. The only things I can do is basically maybe just do a comparative analysis, or look at potential catalysts, good or bad, for the stock, and that's what I'll do now. All right, so when doing comparative analysis, I personally don't like to overthink it, so I just do a quick search in Google, so like movie theater stocks, and I compare it to, like, let's say I already have some tabs open because I already know what their competitors are going to be. So this and this as well. So according to Investopedia, there are movie theater stocks, so IMAX, Cinemark, National Cinema, which I've never heard of. And let's see this one. So AMC, Cinemark, and IMAX. Okay. And then this one says AMC. Again, if you guys have ever used the Fool, Motley Fool, or anything like that, Tom and Dave are the only ones worth watching. And I believe that the best performer on there has already left. But Tom and Dave, they're the only ones that I actually trust on Motley Fool, that have a verifiable good track record. But so they mentioned Cinemark, AMC, Regal, Parent, Cineworld, let's see, blah, blah, Cinemark, and Experience Enhancer, IMAX. So basically the same thing, AMC, IMAX. And let's look at the stocks. So looking at it, the highest IMAX has ever gotten was right around 42.5, around there, back in 2015. All right, cool. And then going over to National Cinemedia, the highest this has ever reached was about just under $30 back in 2007, right before that massive crash in 2008. And then over here with Cinemark. Cinemark, the highest this has ever gotten was about $45 back in 2015. And then we come to the big daddy, which is AMC. Highest has ever been, it was 72.62. Where it's settled at right now is 49.40. So right now, AMC is basically leading the pack in price, but also in kind of exposure. If we just take a quick look at like something like Google Trends, for example, we can see here that basically the interest for AMC peaked at around January 24th to January 30th. And then people just started losing interest and the stock basically just fell back down. Now, we kind of had the same thing happen again, where people started getting interested in the stock again and interest started rising, and so did the price and everything. But as we could see, it's starting to fall back down again. In no way am I insinuating that I know definitively that AMC is going to go down because people just aren't interested in it anymore. But I mean, like, history sort of repeats itself, and this is just something I'm pointing out that I find interesting that's happened historically and could happen again, but it could also happen in a different capacity as well. In terms of naming a price, I can't and I won't, because it's too hard to nail something down, especially when they are essentially leading the entire sector for that situation, right? But in terms of fundamental factors for direction and stuff like that, I did previously mention that I thought that AMC might see a little bit of a bump because of mostly having to do with the blockbusters and it coming back. And when it became the central focus, even when the news was talking about it again, that's when it gets blown out of proportions. But I'm looking at the news cycles and I'm looking at everything else in between that, and it seems like the interest is kind of waning down with that. But not only that, I think some of the fundamental factors on top of that was that people had essentially their unemployment checks to both cover their rent and, well, I don't know when the rent moratorium ends because each state is different, but nobody ever is able to definitively answer the question of like, hey, will AMC do this before I have to start paying my rent again, or even catch up with moratorium, or, you know, when my unemployment runs out and stuff like that. And that's the part I kind of fear right now, because everybody is just, I mean, you saw it in the beginning where everybody's just pumping up everybody's expectations that this thing is going to go tomorrow, now, then, whatever, like that sort of thing. Next catalyst for this. But I see the moratorium ending along with the unemployment ending. A lot of people are going to need money, and this is one of the places where they can draw some income from to float them until they actually find a job, if they find a job. These last two things are just essentially repeats, but essentially the first one is having to do with institutional ownership. And again, most of the money that I see pour into the stuff is institutional. And like I said in my previous video, if you guys haven't seen it, basically I was talking about how you're not fighting against the hedge funds here. You're fighting mostly against market makers who lose their butts. And if you guys look at this, again, we don't know what their actual short position is, but they can go long and short at the same time. And they can take options and stuff like that as well. But essentially, it seems like to me that they were essentially hedged on both sides for AMC. And when it started going up, they started leaning more into the upward side. But again, I'm not a psychic, and I don't have the overt access to be able to tell you definitively. I don't work for the SEC. I don't work for any of these companies. I don't know definitively whether they had shorts on this or not. As far as I can tell, they seem to be net long, but again, it's anybody's guess whether what they were net. And the last one you guys can make a decision however you want, but the last one I want to look at was that, and this is based on a statement I made before, which was basically how when you invest in a company, when the company grows, you grow along with it. Well, when a company's not making money, you also lose with it as well. And we're seeing that here where, again, back in 2013, 2014, so forth, they were making money until they started losing money in 2017, made a little bit, but they just kept continuing losing up until last year, which they lost massively because they were not open. They were making no revenue. Now, fast forward into around later this year, again, we're still waiting on the next updates for this. I expect their revenue to probably be up a little bit more, but I think that their net income is still probably going to be down because I don't think they're going to be generating as much revenue as people think they are. But again, this is just probably way far out there and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that I think that AMC is going to collapse overnight, but I think, again, reinforcing the point, I think over time, they're not innovating anything, but I think that they're going to start to slow burn. All right, so my final thoughts and opinions are basically, I think these other people are creating a dangerous scenario for people because they are essentially preying on your emotions to where they're creating a dangerous echo chamber where a lot of people who missed out on the GME are getting FOMO into AMC, throwing their entire net worth, even going into margin and stuff like that, on the hopes that this will make them rich so that they don't have to go back to work. They can pay off all their rent. They can go buy a house, do all that sort of normal stuff, right? But they're not setting realistic expectations on this situation. And I think that that's what's going to happen is when the piper comes calling and they're going to be extremely disappointed and even poorer. But, fundamentals aside and everything, like I think that, yeah, they will regain some of their net income, but I don't think it's going to be profitable barring any types of innovation. Like they could have an innovation up their sleeve and I don't know about it yet, but we have to wait and see. And the last thing is basically, again, I'm not chastising anybody profit taking and I'm not telling you what to do, but taking some money off the table is always smart because you pay for your trade and you make a little bit of money. You don't care if it goes to zero at that point, right? But that's just a personal opinion of mine, and that's just personally how I play stuff. But yeah, there's nothing else to say other than just remember, just because you're a day trader doesn't mean you have to trade every single day.